Treasure Island, Chapter 5, The Last of the Blind Man.
My curiosity was stronger than my fear, so I crept back toward the inn, hid behind a bush, and watched as my enemies began to arrive. 5 of them ran along the road, with a man holding a lantern in front. Right behind them were 3 men, hand in hand. The man in the middle was blind.
"Knock down the door!"
The blind man cried.
"Aye, aye, sir!"
2 men answered, and then they ran at the door. I saw them pause in confusion and surprise when they discovered that the door was open. Then the blind man shouted,
"Go in, in!"
He cursed at the men for their delay. 5 of them obeyed at once, while 2 stayed in the road with the blind man. There was a cry of surprise, and then someone shouted from the house,
"Bill's dead!"
"The Flint's secret papers, I mean!"
Came to the door of the inn. "Bill's been searched already," he said. "Nothing's left."
"It's those inn people. It's that boy. I wish I'd put his eyes out!"
Pew cried.
"They can't be far. Scatter, lads! Find them!"
Heavy feet pounded to and fro, and the men toppled furniture over and kicked in the doors of every room. Then the men came out again, one after another, onto the road.
"They aren't here,"
one announced. The whistle that had frightened my mother and me earlier sounded 2 times. Then I had thought it was Pew calling his men to assault us. But now I realized it was a warning signal from a lookout hiding somewhere near the village. "There's the signal," a man said. "That means the law is coming. Let's go!"
"You dogs, you're so close!"
cried Pew.
"Scatter and look for Bill's secret. Oh, if I only had eyes."
At Pew's urging, 2 fellows began to look here and there, but half-heartedly, with an eye to their own danger all the time. The rest stood on the road, unsure what to do.
"You could be as rich as kings, you fools!"
Pew shouted.
"But you're just standing around! I'll end up a poor beggar when I could be riding in a fine coach! If you had any guts, you'd catch that boy!"
"Forget it, Pew. We've got the money,"
grumbled one man.
"The boy and his parents might have hid the papers,"
another said.
"Take the money, Pew, and don't stand here squawking."
Pew struck blindly at his men right and left, with his stick hitting a few of them. They, in turn, cursed at the sightless villain and tried in vain to catch the stick and take it from him. Their quarrel saved my mother and me, for while it was raging there was another sound. Horses galloping. The pirates heard it too. They turned and ran, separating in every direction, so that in half a minute no one remained but Pew. He tapped up and down the road in a frenzy, groping and calling. Finally, he took a wrong turn and ran a few steps past me, crying,
"Alan! Tom! Job!"
and other names.
"Don't leave old Pew! Mates, not old Pew!"
The noise of the horses grew louder, and 5 riders swept down the road at a full gallop. Pew screamed and ran straight into a ditch, but he was on his feet again in a second and made another dash, now utterly bewildered, right into the path of the nearest horse. The rider tried to stop, but Pew went down with a terrible cry. The 4 hoofs trampled him as he fell on his side and then collapsed face down, moving no more. As the riders pulled up, I leaped to my feet, horrified at the accident. A lad from the village was trailing behind the horsemen.
"These men are military officers,"
he told me.
"I met them and recruited them to help on my way to Dr. Livesey's."
Pew was dead, and his crew had fled back to their ship, chased by the horsemen. As for my mother, we carried her to the village, and cold water and smelling salts soon had her back to normal. When I finally returned to the Admiral Benbow with Captain Dance, one of the officers, I saw that the house was completely wrecked.
"We are ruined!"
I cried, looking at the result of the pirates' furious hunt. Captain Dance was sympathetic.
What were they after? Money?
No, sir, not money.
I replied.
I believe I have what they were looking for in my breast pocket. I'd like to show it to Dr. Livesey.
Well, I have to ride there and report what happened back to him and the squire,
He said cheerily as he mounted his horse.
So come along, Hawkins.
Thank you, sir.
I said as he offered his hand and then pulled me up behind him in the saddle.
Treasure Island, Chapter 6, The Captain's Papers.
Captain Dance and I rode hard until we drew up before Dr. Livesey's door. The house was dark, but I jumped down and knocked anyway. A maid opened.
We'll find them both at one location.
The distance was short, so I ran alongside the horse up the moonlit avenue to the gleaming white buildings and grand old gardens. Here, Captain Dance dismounted, and the squire's servant led us into the library. Squire Trelawney and Dr. Livesey sat on either side of a bright fire smoking their pipes. I'd never seen the squire up close before. Over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders, he had a friendly face, reddened and lined from his long travels. The natural movement of his very black eyebrows gave him a look of a quick but not a bad temper.
Come in,
he said, sounding very stately and condescending.
Good evening, Dance.
The doctor said with a nod.
And good evening to you, Jim. What brings you here?
Captain Dance told his story, and the two gentlemen leaned forward, forgetting to smoke in their surprise and interest. Squire Trelawney rose and started to pace, and the doctor, as if to hear better, took off his powdered wig and sat there, looking odd with his close-cropped black hair. When they heard how my mother had bravely gone back to the inn, Dr. Livesey slapped his thigh, and Trelawney cried,
Bravo! And that's the whole story,
Captain Dance said at last.
Trampling that wicked scoundrel was an act of virtue,
The squire said.
like stamping on a cockroach.
Do you have what they were after, Jim?
The doctor asked.
Here it is, sir.
I gave him the bundle of papers. The doctor looked excited, as if his fingers were itching to open the bundle right away, but he put it quietly in his coat pocket instead.
Thank you again, Captain Dance.
The squire said.
Jim can sleep here tonight. Dance, you are dismissed.
The captain bowed and left the room, and I sat down at a side table to eat a pigeon pie a maid had brought me.
Have you heard of this Flint?
The doctor asked the squire.
Have I heard of him?
The squire cried.
Flint was the most bloodthirsty pirate that ever sailed.
Suppose I have here in my coat pocket some clue as to where Flint buried his treasure,
Said the doctor.
How much treasure do you think might be involved?
If we had a clue like that,
Trelawney cried.
I'd hire a ship to take us there immediately, and I'd have that treasure in a year.
The doctor took out the papers and said,
If Jim agrees, let's open this.
I nodded and got up from the side table as the doctor opened the bundle. Inside was a book and a sealed paper.
First, let's inspect the book,
The doctor said. The squire and I peered over the doctor's shoulder, and we saw that the first 10 pages were filled with a curious series of entries. At one end of each line was a date, and at the other end a sum of money. Between the two were a varying number of crosses.
I don't understand it,
Dr. Livesey said.
It's an account book.
Trelawney cried.
The crosses stand for ships or towns that they sank or plundered, and the sums are the scoundrel's share. God help the poor souls who cross paths with Flint.
And look,
The doctor said.
the amounts increase as the years pass.
As he rose in the ranks of pirates, his share got bigger.
Explained Trelawney. Then the squire noticed something else in the book.
Look, Flint even had a table to figure out the different values of foreign coins.
Oh, no one was going to cheat him,
Laughed the doctor.
And now,
Trelawney said.
for the other item.
The doctor carefully opened the sealed paper, and a map of an island fell out, with latitude and longitude and every inlet, hill, and bay marked. Everything that would be needed to safely anchor a ship upon its shores. 9 miles long and 5 across, the island had 2 landlocked harbors and a hill marked the Spyglass. Below a red cross, in small, neat handwriting, "Bulk of treasure here" was written. And on the back of the map, these notes. Tall tree, spyglass shoulder bearing north of north-northeast, Skeleton Island, east-southeast and by east, 10 feet. The bar silver is in the north cache by the east hill, 10 fathoms south of Black Crag with a face on it. The arms are in the Sand Hill, north, point of North Inlet Cape, bearing east and a quarter north, J.F.
It's incomprehensible to me,
I said as the squire and Dr. Livesey laughed.
I'll start for Bristol tomorrow,
Trelawney said.
We'll have the best ship and crew in England, and Hawkins will be our cabin boy. Livesey will be ship's doctor, I'll be the admiral, and we'll take my men Tom Redruth, Richard Joyce, and John Hunter. We'll have no trouble finding the spot, and we'll have plenty of money to enjoy forever after.
I'll go,
the doctor said,
and Jim will be a credit to the undertaking, but there's only one man I'm afraid of.
Who's that?
Trelawney cried.
Him, sir.
You,
the doctor said.
You can't hold your tongue. We're not the only men who want that money. The pirates who attacked the inn tonight are bold and desperate men, and they're not far off. We must not breathe a word of what we found.
I'll be as silent as the grave,
Trelawney vowed. The squire went to Bristol to outfit a ship and get us ready to go to sea, and it took longer than he thought. The doctor had to go to London to seek a physician to take over his practice, and I stayed at the squire's house with Tom